Welcome to Docu.Text 06, the 6th annual documentary film festival at the National Library of Israel. The event will begin in just 4 minutes now. The event will be Anat Surya talking to Raphael Balulu, the filmmaker of A Song of Loves, the story of Rabbi David Buzaglo, the greatest Moroccan Hebrew liturgical poet, of the 20th century. Musical performance will be by Moroccan Jewish Bakashot poetry, played by Mr. Yagel Harouche. For our viewers in Zoom, you may turn your cameras on. Regretfully, we cannot permit opening microphones, but if you will have any questions, please type them in the chat room, and we'll do our best to answer what we can during the event. Thank you very much. We'll see you in 3 minutes now. Welcome, everyone, to the final event of Docu.Text 06, the 6th annual documentary film festival at the National Library of Israel. The event will begin in just a few seconds now. Anat Surya will be talking to Mr. Raphael Balulu, the filmmaker of A Song of Loves, the story of Rabbi David Buzaglo, the greatest Moroccan Hebrew liturgical poet of the 20th century. Musical performances will be by Mr. Yagel Harouche. He will play Moroccan Jewish Bakashot poetry. Again, this is our final event of the National Library of Israel's Docu.Text Festival. Please, everyone, enjoy. For our Zoom participants, you can definitely turn your cameras on. Regretfully, we cannot permit opening microphones. But if you have any questions, please type them in the chat room, and we'll do our best to ask and answer the questions during the event. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody, for being with us this year, and enjoy.
Well, good evening, Film Festival Docu.Text, and we are with Raphael Balulu. Nice to meet you, and Yagel Harouche, the musicians that is joining us to this event. Raphael, you are the filmmaker, of the Song of Loves, the story of Rabbi David Buzaglo. And I would like to begin not actually with the film itself, but with you. And I would like to hear a bit about your background and how you feel it relating to this film.
Well, I grew up in Afula, in the northern part of Israel,
Right.
in a Maghrebian community, meaning North African community, mainly people from Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. For us, the culture that the film portrayed was, or for me, was pretty much my childhood landscape, alongside other influences which are usually were alien in the fact that they came from the educational system, meaning from the state,
Right.
the Zionist culture per se, meaning the secular Zionist culture. So in that way, Rabbi David Buzaglo, Zichrono Livracha, was part of the menu, so to speak.
So actually, he was, you heard him in the community. Was your family traditional?
I am a half and a half, so to speak. My father is from westernized, under French influence family from Rabat, which is the capital of Morocco.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother is more traditional from the village side, from the Anti-Atlas, from a place called Skura.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather, Rabbi Shimon, was a rabbi. And they were religious, Moroccan style, meaning rabbinical style. So basically, but also my father's side, it's you didn't have the European secularism. I mean, people didn't supposedly murdered God, and went to build a country. God was there, tradition was there. The Moroccan identity, the general Moroccan identity, and the Jewish Moroccan identity was there. The piyutim was there. For me, as a child who grew up in the 80s and in the 90s as a teenage, these people like Rabbi David Buzaglo and other were pretty much like something that's beyond time, above time. They were like these, images. Only later, when I become more aware and integrated into history and made research, then I could give them time and history and face and and location and psychology and so on. They became real, not only symbols.
But you would say that you were raised with his, poems and music
No, I grew up when I knew that he was there somewhere.
somewhere. Would you say, because I know that we have many types of immigrants, right? And I say that, in many ways, the Jews that came from the Islamic countries were in many ways felt, and I believe that they also, it was part of something that was ongoing, to my opinion, till today in some sense. Their culture was reduced. So did you felt this kind of conflict inside yourself, that this kind of culture, music and poems and poets, that was something that actually was not cool, was not really, how would you felt as a teenager, for instance?
Well, as a child, teenage is more crucial because you deal with your identity a lot, right?
Right. This is why I'm asking.
As a child, it was natural. There is the culture in the community, in my house, meaning there is French and Moroccan Darija, Moroccan Arabic, and there is the holidays and all the old people, even if they weren't so old, but maybe for me they were old. They were like 40. I'm 40, but like 40 or 50 or so on. They spoke these other languages, and they were from there. And for me, it was natural. Obviously, in school, it was a totally different world, right?
Right. So
Both.
you were removed from it?
I
You were
didn't.
distanced?
I didn't realize that it was. As a child, you don't really realize that something is wrong. That everything that is belong to you from your native culture is absent in the official educational system. And also even stuff that are big, that are considered to be like Jewish consensus, like the Holocaust, right? The Holocaust. It's a catastrophe, but for me as a child, it was something in school, in the ceremony, in national ceremonies. But when
Right.
you go back to the neighborhood, to the community, of course it's a Jewish issue and it's an Israeli issue, but it's not. It's different.
It's not in the data of the memories?
Something like that. And later, when I was a teenage, I grew up in the Israel Valley. Israel Valley, for the one who don't know, it's like the heart of the Zionist ethos.
Yeah.
And we were the peripheral town, the Ayarat Pituach, as they
Right.
say in Hebrew. and then we felt the gap and the patronism and the racism
Right.
that were sometimes vague and underground, and sometimes was very blunt and rude from the kibbutzim around us. But I also felt merciful. I mean, I felt like they looked to me like narrow-minded, so I didn't really, it was like even made me a little bit patronize it back, so to speak. Okay. But then I understand, I realize how the gap is huge. And when I become, as a teenage, of course, it made me feel, I thought about my parents or my grandparents as primitive, as something that belonged to the old world. I really was into British music, and I really admired, cinema and the Nouvelle Vague, the New Wave,
Yeah.
and all the European cinema, which later, now I can say that people who grew up in Morocco actually more related to this kind of culture than people who came
Right.
from Poland in some ways. But back then, I felt like I marked their culture as something that is false, that is wrong.
Yeah. So I actually want to go back to the film that we are here, gathered to celebrate and talk about this wonderful film. And I want to compliment you because, it's not an easy task to take a character that is not existing anymore, and you have just his music, basically, and his poems and everything, and to build him and his story, right? It's a huge achievement. Now, you didn't choose, basically. It's a question what it is to choose, right, in terms of the filmmaking. But many times we choose to go with a question, with a topic, with a story, and we follow it and we struggle. But here, Yair Kedar, the producer of this amazing cultural cinema, came to you and asked you, if I understand well, would you like to make a movie about David Buzaglo? So how did how was it? Someone choosing for you, and then you have to choose, and what does it mean?
First of all, from a philosophical or ethical point of view, it's a great question for filmmakers in general, right? Regarding that specific story, I think that the reason that Yair approached me, and first of all, he asked me, do you know
Who is David Buzaglo?
No, do you know Rabbi David Buzaglo? And I
Uh-huh.
said, sure, I heard of him. Would you like to make a film about him? And said, sure, of course. And I was in the route for making fictional films, right? I had a few shorts and I won these festivals, and I was in the route, and I worked on a film about the Israeli Black Panther movement. And I'm saying that soon you will understand why I'm saying that I was planning to make the film about the Israeli Black Panther. And he approached me and he asked me if I want to make this film. And obviously I was grateful, and I thanked him for the opportunity. And we start working on the relationship of a producer director, and we start working on the film. And I think it was obvious. I mean, the reason he approached me, I think, was because I was part of that culture, and I just finished film school, and I think he probably heard about me regarding that context. And when we start to work on Buzaglo, there is a story that I always tell, and I think it's like the best example for your previous question, and also for that question. The first thing I went to Google, right, to see what's.
Of course.
And I went to the the archive of the Israeli National Library, to other national archives, private archives, and I pressed Buzaglo. Some was zero results.
Wow.
And other were related to crime. The name Buzaglo in Google were related to criminals. And for people who don't know, in Israel, one of the main topics is this discrimination of Jews who came from the Muslim country, what we call here Mizrahim,
Right.
and the way that the way they came into as a marginalized group, they went into to crime. So you have this great poet, and you don't have any archive about him, and almost everything that you can find on Google is related to negative things that. And so then I went to a quest, old school. I just went to houses, and I met this, hundreds of people who knew him, who heard about him, who had one picture, two pictures, a reel of audio, and it was like ants who work, who gather food for the winter. We just gathered a lot. It's not that much, but we gather what we can find from the collective, from the community, from collective memory. And this is one of the most amazing things about Buzaglo, because 40 years after his death, against all odds, this person, he didn't write. That's something that we have to understand. He refused to write his poems. And the establishment didn't recognize him. There was one interview from 1966 which the author didn't even remember what I was talking about when I called her, right? And
wow, this is a strong story.
It's an amazing,
wow.
amazing interview. Amazing,
wow.
Because he was an amazing guy. She was like 22 years old just did her job. And so basically, this guy, Rabbi David Buzaglo,
he's a guy.
Yeah.
And a great musician.
He was left in the memory of people, in the memory of the community.
Amazing. So I want to speak a bit about the puzzle of making this kind of film, in terms of how you create his character. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I loved about this film is also your approach in terms of the cinema and the I would say what you did, not just in terms of the cinematography, which is beautiful, but also the script. So I actually want to speak about the script with you, because you did something very interesting. You took the story and you build chapters with the Hebrew letters, which is a kind of formality. It's very much, based on this aesthetic. So I want to hear about that. But before that, if it's okay, let's hear one of his songs of Rabbi David Buzaglo.
Do you want to say about the part? It's Binuna Mordim. You want to talk about it? I think you can. Yeah.
Binuna Mordim is actually one of the poems that Rabbi David Buzaglo write as an answer to one of the most ethical poems
Zionist.
in the Zionist movement. This poem, Babel Wad, which described the war and the honor of the war. and Rabbi David Buzaglo tried to reconstruct the gisha, approach to the war, and try to say that actually as a Jewish nation we should ask for peace. This is actually our main goal. Yeah.
אז אני רוצה לשאול אותך לעשות. I need to breathe a moment. It's amazing. It makes me really, there is something so unique about what he did, with this song, for instance. When you were going through a research, right? Because usually with this type of films, we're doing a research, any documentary films, also feature, I think many times you have an idea, but it's very, you have like a part of the story, right? And then you have to go through a research. So I want to hear about the research and how did you work to actually build a script?
Okay, so as I said before, going to the archives was a bit of a disappointment.
Mhm. But also you discovered something about
Right,
us,
right,
society.
right,
Yeah.
right. And hopefully this kind of films, I mean, in many ways, this film also created an archive because it
Completely,
was
yeah.
absent.
Yeah.
So as we said, National Archive didn't work.
Yeah.
So we approached the community.
Mhm.
And we used network of his, let's say like this, if he was alive today, he was 117. Okay? So you can understand that most of his colleagues and friends died before I even dreamt about doing this film, right? So we approached to the young generation who escort him,
Mhm.
meaning people who were 70 till 90.
Mhm.
And I actually just went all, it's in many ways שחזרתי.
Yeah,
Recreated the journey of Buzaglo himself in
Yeah.
Israel.
Wow.
And moved from one place to another to meet the one person, the two persons who knew him, who heard about him, who saw him live in Casablanca or in other places in Morocco or in Israel, and gathered all this information and gathered stories. Together with that, I gathered characters. The one, the two, the three, the fourth that I felt that knew him in a different perspective, beyond the mythology, beyond the stories that I heard all over and over again. And also people who have, in Moroccan we say hiba. Hiba, it's like it's a combination of aura and charisma
Right.
and good vibes.
Mhm.
People, and why I wanted to do that. Also, for me, it was important to letavech, to negotiate
Yeah.
the audience other a different imagery of Moroccan identity,
Mhm.
which was more intellectual, calm, emotional, peaceful,
And real.
and real, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because people didn't know. I think, I mean, for me, I was growing up, I'm older than
of
you.
course,
Yeah.
the
So
image
I was
of,
growing up, it's Ashkenazi, but it was all of us were
Right.
oppressed about the same, narratives that, was, of course, making injustice to
Right.
this culture.
Right. So the idea was to gather these people and to create what we called
new
meta
narrative.
text or
Yeah.
hypertext,
Mhm.
meaning all those people you can't bring Buzaglo because you don't have interviews, you don't have a film of him, so you bring a lot of different models of Moroccanness or people who still have the diaspora kind of way of style, and all together you build this character of Buzaglo himself. That was the first thing. I have to say that, as you know, you don't make films by yourself. So my other two main partners were Yael Badarshi, the editor, and Avigail Sperber,
Right,
who shot the cinematographer, the DOP,
yeah.
the cinematographer. And together we designed, first of all, in pre-production and in production itself, the look of the film. And later with Yael, we decided to create these chapters and also to work on the meanings of sky and water.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it also. But the chapters basically work on the idea of 10 Day of Redemption, Aseret Yemei Teshuvah,
Mhm.
and also the 10 years that he was in Israel, and the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, which were pure letters, is to honor the Hebrew language as Buzaglo himself honored it.
I want to ask you in that respect, I mean, when you were building, right, the script, where were you questioning yourself? What kind of question you were puzzled by? Because I believe that every movie, specifically this kind of movie, which is kind of a puzzle where you have to look for the pieces, right? Because you don't have a box with all the pieces, right? So you have to look and gather them. So and it's always a journey, right? And we always ask questions, and we have some conflicts. So what would you say about this movie? During this journey, what were, I would say, the conflict you had with yourself regarding this story?
I'll give you a technical answer first.
All right.
I think we edited film for about 12 months, something like that, which is fast, right? In, I don't know, whatever, 12 months.
I do it 2 months.
Okay.
But never mind. No, for with me it's
Okay.
crazy. But 12 months is great.
Okay, so we
I
did
would
it in
love to do
12
it.
months.
Yeah.
And I would say that only on the end of the 10 months we had a film. I mean, until 9 or 9.5 or even 10 months, it was a rough cut who didn't function. Okay, there was no movie. And then suddenly, you know when it happened, the magical moment, you have a rough cut and you have a movie, and then you can relax, and then you have work to do, right? The fine tuning.
Right.
So, and I think what happened is that it's an episodical film. I mean, you have a linear story.
Yeah, but you did beautiful work in that sense that you have a linear, because it's follow his journey, actually. So you have a timeline, right? But there is a lot of abstract also
Right,
issues.
but if you let's say if you drop the chapters, the film will collapse, and I tried it because it's episodes, and then you don't have the emotional continuity of a character, of a person, of the journey in time, right?
Yeah.
And we did it through the chapters, which were like a colisot, I don't know, like a building structure, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And through the
constructions.
and through the voiceover and the music of Shlomo Bar, who narrated Buzaglo himself.
Beautifully.
Yes,
and very
it was,
moving.
One of it was probably the fun part of the film.
Yeah.
Because it's in the end. It's always in the end. That's. Did I answer your question?
Well, I would like to dig with it a bit, but we'll go. I would like to hear more of his songs. I just want to ask you, because now you heard this song, you know, probably you heard it so many times. For me, I must tell you, as your audience, very fresh one, because I saw the film just recently. For me, this song was kind of almost the climax, you know, of the film, and I want to ask you about, because it's so symbolic. I ask myself why it was for me the climax, you know, because you're such a gifted and brilliant creator and musician and poetry and everything that he was. And I felt that it was so almost mind-blowing that he did this poem at his time. His soul was like unbelievable, like a prophet in a way. So you know, I felt so touched by it, and it was one of the great moments of the movie.
So maybe I would say one thing before you start play. I think we don't have, usually in the Israeli culture, a dialogue between giants, cultural giants. Guri, who wrote Babel Wad, was a giant of early Zionist culture, one of the founding father and so on. Buzaglo is one of the founding father of the new Israeli culture, as far as I consider it. And you have this Buzaglo, in many ways, the turning point. And you have these two narratives, or these two categories of Israelis, and they have a dialogue, very peaceful dialogue.
Very natural.
Very
like
not very natural.
Very natural. For me, I was hit by that.
Two artists who have
amazing.
Right.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I don't want to generalize, but because there is also a positive stereotypes about the Moroccan rabbinical ethos, which is very peaceful and live among. I mean, it's not harsh. It's not radical in the sense of in the negative sense of being radical.
Which is, by the way, actually true.
It's true, right? But you have. I mean, I'm doing a film now about. Well, I don't want to actually talk about it. Maybe so.
Yeah, we will speak about your previous. I mean your next film.
I want to say something that okay.
Well, but you know that you also have all kinds of rabbis.
Right. That's
so you have to take it in consideration, right?
But what I want to say that Buzaglo still, I think he was Zionist, no doubt about it. Even I would say Messianic Zionist, in that sense that he felt that it's the prophecies that the Jews go back home, right?
Yeah.
But still, he was peaceful, and he knew how to separate, and he did it differently than the Israeli establishment and the Israeli culture did, from the Arab culture, the Arab nations, the Arab people, and the politics, Pan-Arabism, Nazirism, and so on.
Right.
So I think it was so back that time, and even today in Israel, it's very complex that you have someone that is supposedly right-wings, Zionist, but still he is part of the Arab culture. He is part of the Judeo-Muslim culture. And it's something that is great and also kind of a remedy or a cure or an option to our situation here in Israel.
This is
or in the Middle East.
Yeah, I felt it hit me in the way that for me this poem and this song is so relevant, so touching. And I would say that the fact that he grew up, in this culture, and it was not like many of us that are so apart, forced to be apart, kind of. And for him it was natural, and you showed it very beautiful in your film, that they were saying. I mean, we were in the Mamuna, it was part, we were not, it was not a schematic and dualistic kind of style of living, we were not living in a ghetto exactly. So this kind of, I would say, experience we lack. And I feel that in a way, when he meets the experience of war, he can bring something that Guri couldn't bring. Because he had something. He was part of this culture, and he was reflecting, and he was actually like a prophecy, saying, but we can go into peace, in this way he brought something very important to our existence here. So let's hear his next
Actually, the next song is part of the tradition that he revived.
Yeah.
The Bakashot traditions, which is actually love liturgical poems that we used to sing after midnight, in Shabbat midnight. I think this is the most beautiful love poems that wrote in Hebrew.
Wow.
And this one is Yudad Shenat Eini, by Rabbi Israel Najara, a poet from the 16th century in Sfat.
يودد شنات عيني فأسعك أوني تخيم تشوكتك דרור לו אבחרה יעל 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 ואלה אזכרה יעל 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 ואלה אזכרה יעל 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 ואלה אזכרה.
It was lovely. So I want to ask you before I really very much interested in your next work, but your next movie. But if you can tell me two things that are very interesting, is making such a movie. Actually, what did you discover? I mean, did you were in a sense surprised in some aspect of the making of this movie, and how it was received, because you're making a movie about a hidden, great, a giant, as you say, it. There is a community that acknowledge it, but there is the Israeli, mainstream, I would say, that is not aware of it. So I'm very much curious about what was for you a surprise through the making of this movie and how it was received.
Okay, I told you before that before Yair approached me, I worked on a fiction feature film about the Israeli Black Panther movement.
Right.
Which in many ways are the children of the generation of Rabbi David Buzaglo. Meaning
Right.
Moroccan who maybe came to Israel when they were 1, 2, 3 years old or born here right after their parents came.
Mm-hmm.
And suffered from discrimination, racism, and grew up in these marginalized neighborhoods and grew up with anger and despair and established this, as far as I consider it, amazing and beautiful counter-resistant movement. This was the energy that I came making the film about Rabbi David Buzaglo. I was very angry. Very political, I went to a lot of, I was participating in a lot of these action groups, and I went to a lot of protests, and we did stuff, and it was very
You were an
stormy.
activist.
I was an activist, right. It was a stormy period. And then I'm going to make this film about Buzaglo, and my goal is to tell everyone that we have intellectuals, we have
Musicians,
beautiful
culture.
rich culture, better than yours, you know what? Supposedly, right? Or you're not going to tell us how we look. We're going to tell our stories.
Yeah.
And I struggle with him, and he's telling me, "Hey, Habibi, ease, relax." That's not me. He's very calm, very, very moderate.
So you became, talking with him,
Dialogue, definitely.
dialogue.
No, he affected me. I feel like this character affected me. And I understand why I understand his charisma. I understand why people see him as a leader.
Yeah.
And even when he refused being a leader, he still got the kingdomship, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Look, we are talking here
Right.
about him,
Right.
Also
45 years after
Right.
his death, 46
yeah.
almost.
In a sense, is even more relevant than Chaim Guri. Hearing your two songs, I mean. But
Because
especially-
Chaim Guri is the main, the core.
Yeah.
And right. And so making the film, you have a dialogue with this character that you're escorting, and he's escorting you, until the moment that I think a lot of filmmakers will relate it, that he doesn't need your hand, or you don't need his hand and the movie just goes, you know, find his rhythm, find his way, and then you discover that you can resist differently. With all my respect to the Israeli Black Panther movement, there is other resistance, and there is other tuning, and other notion, and other energy. And I discovered Rabbi David Buzaglo energy, and I think it made me more calmer. And I'm not saying that looking back at the past and saying, no, that's nonsense. No, it's not nonsense. But you have a lot. I added another layer.
Right.
Um,
So actually, you know, I feel that first of all, in the movie is very poetic and has a wonderful rhythm for me anyway. I felt very much that he is struggling in his, you know, in his word with layers, as Meir Buzaglo was saying. I was very moved by it. You know, that he had few layers of existence. You know, it was not about doing a career and being a great musician.
Right.
So he was had a real spiritual dialogue. For me, it was fascinating. You know, the way he existed.
And I think Meir, his son, Dr. Meir Buzaglo, also professor. Congratulations to Meir. He spoke about the tension between catastrophe, and it's not an easy thing to say that coming to Israel is a catastrophe.
Right.
To Geulah, to redemption.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because these two forces worked on the Jews who came from Morocco or from the Muslim countries. The oppression that they accepted and the Geulah. Just one more sentence about how people received the film.
Yeah, this is important.
I couldn't expect it. And you felt like it was land, dry land who asked for water.
Wow.
People asked to see a complicated, positive, something that they knew from their houses, from their families, from synagogue, and it was booming. I was quite amazed by that.
Wow. So I would like, you know, and for, you know, him and you know, you're making him back to. Actually, I think in a way it's like you discovered in a way him, you know, in a way that is not expected, because I feel that the movie is about him, about the great music and poems of David Buzaglo, but also about you and about the new culture and new filmmakers and musicians that actually is influenced and is part of their life and images and you know, and now coming to this moment, I would like to hear, you know, your song, and I feel that you brought it to the mainstream, which you know that every Israeli and Jews all over the world, you know, can actually enjoy this giant poem and musician.
I think it's not only it's not only about Rabbi David Buzaglo, because in the Eastern cultures, there is no, you know, this big hero, as Meir said. I think the fact that this movie got inside our culture is bring back this language, because this poem is about language, is about point of view about the world that were obscured, and it's more than just his figure, you know. This is what I feel, at least.
I agree with you. I mean, it's clear, you know, but he was, you know, every musician, and specifically a poem, work with language, you know, so that for sure. I mean, why shouldn't speak about, you know, we work with language, with images, with visual images, with music. So for us as filmmakers and scripts, but you know, he was a giant as an artist, and he you know, he was almost lost. So I feel that you bring a huge treasure for our culture and society. It's a very important film. I mean, for me, it was a huge experience watching
Thank you.
The next song that we will play is from my new CD, which based on a book, poems that I wrote to perform in Midnight Vigil in Tikkun Chatzot. New poems, new liturgical poems that wrote during the last 10 years. It's called Yahabet Be'oni.
יהבט בעוני ודלות מעוני, כי גבר מעני דילני מדעת. יהבט בעוני ודלות מעוני, כי גבר מעני דילני מדעת. גלה כבודך אשר גלה, ושוב נא בגילה עמך לדעת. גלה כבודך אשר גלה, ושוב נא בגילה עמך לדעת. לגן אשר יבש השכם מעדנך, תאיר ארץ כמים תימא לדעת. לגן אשר יבש השכם מעדנך, תאיר ארץ כמים תימא לדעת. הגלנה ופוס חביב עלינו סוכת שלומך, הגלנה ופוס חביב עלינו סוכת שלומך, תאיר ארץ מכבודך. נגילה ונשמחה בך, מהר אהוב כי במועד וחוננו כי מעולם. מהר אהוב כי במועד וחוננו כי מעולם. וחוננו כי מעולם. וחוננו כי מעולם.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So, wow. So I really actually want to ask you about your previous movie. What are your plans?
You mean my next films?
Yeah, your next film.
I'm actually working on a few projects now, some in production, some in development, and some in pre-development. I'm doing a film about, it's different than Buzaglo, it's a documentary about espionage between Israel and Egypt during the post-Six Day War. Very thrilling, very James Bond Israeli style. and I'm shooting a film now about the Baba Sali, Rabbi Israel Abechzera, which is if we talk about Buzaglo and if we talk about the Jacqueline Kahanov, which I also made a film about, and Baba Sali, hopefully I want that in the end, I don't know, when I will look back, I'll see, who knows how many films about these characters who build these various identities and approach, who portrayed the history of Jews in the Muslim world, and give them, donate a little bit to how the Israeli perceived them. And other thing that is also in development is the history of the Ashdod port.
Really?
Which
Wow.
is it's a more economical kind of documentary, and other things that
Are going to follow it.
yeah, right.
Hopefully, yes.
Inshallah.
So it sounds a lot. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed I learned so much from it. And thank you for your beautiful music. I loved it.
Thank you, Anna, for your wise question.
Well, it's influenced by your work. So, thank you. It was lovely to be here in Film Festival Docs in the National Library in Jerusalem, and have a great evening.
Thank you for having us.